Welcome to 2023 and our first episode for the year. You're watching the Leadership Lens, where we speak with global leaders on what's trending in the ecosystem today. The collision of work and personal life that was encountered in 2020 to 2022 has clearly left us with some sticky habits, and one of them being able to manage this level of multitasking, where the lines between work hours and personal hours have really blurred. Microsoft and Forrester recently launched a thought leadership paper called the Workday Consumer has logged in. And to speak with us in detail about post-pandemic habits is Nick Seckold, Regional Vice President, APAC, Microsoft Advertising. Welcome, Nick. It's great to have you on the Leadership Lens.
Hi, Shani. Thanks for having me. It's lovely to be here, and I'm looking forward to the conversation about our research with Forrester on the Workday Consumer.
Absolutely. So for our viewers, Nick's responsibilities at Microsoft Advertising include strategic development and operational delivery of Microsoft Advertising's growth partnerships and service offerings across digital media, search advertising, technology, and analytics in the APAC region. So Nick, very interesting paper that you have launched. And according to you, with the changing consumer behaviors post-pandemic, which of them will be the most sticky, or what are your top 3 picks out of them?
Oh, it would be difficult to highlight only 3. I think so much has changed since the pandemic hit us all back in 2020. As you mentioned at the beginning, sort of work and life, used to have this nice little balance where we'd all spend our Mondays to Fridays at work. You would go have your morning commute and the afternoon commute. Then we'd spend the weekends doing personal tasks such as shopping or washing or mowing the lawn, depending on where you live. But certainly spending more time with family and friends rather than working. Post-pandemic, we're shopping differently, we work differently, we travel differently. We've actually even educating our kids differently than we did pre-pandemic. So, and if you told me 3 years ago that I'd be mowing the lawn or doing my week's washing during work hours, I would have thought you were crazy. But as you know, everybody knows that that's exactly what has happened. The lines between work and home have blurred so much, and it's just led us to less separation between the two areas. And initially, many companies worried about their workforce productivity as they transitioned to remote working. I remember, talking to lots of clients and agencies, particularly who had been used to, who historically, but people have been in the office, all the time, were worried about productivity of their workforce when they transition to home working. But actually what we've seen is the opposite. We've shown that, or consumers have shown and businesses have shown that they can be just as impactful when their workers are working from home. When I think about my own behavior, I'm definitely, my habits have definitely changed. I used to dread the commute, and now I commute probably 3 or 4 days a week. Actually, I look forward to it now, because it builds separation between home and work. I'm working sort of longer hours on some days and shorter on others because I have the flexibility to do the things that I need to do during the day. So from a marketing perspective, what that means, I guess, for advertisers is there's a really big opportunity to rethink how they talk to their consumers or their audiences that they're targeting through their marketing campaigns, and what they do during the workday. Traditional day parting strategies accounted for work time. We've talked to a lot of brands and marketers over the years around, what do you do 9 to 5, Monday to Friday versus your weekends, and what are people doing during those hours? So now with what's emerging is this Workday Consumer that we're calling it, who are using their PC for more than just work. They're actually using their PC, obviously during work hours, but not just for work. That you think about your own behavior, looking at online and maybe doing some surfing during work hours is nothing new. but you would always doing that typically in a work environment. So allowing yourself to spend, a great deal of time during the day on those tasks was difficult, or actually pretty much frowned upon. But if you are working from home and you have a culture in your business where impact is judged rather than the hours you spend, you probably are able to then trade off some time and do the things that you want to do, providing you are doing the work as well. So we're seeing a lot more of those signals come through in the data that we look at, and obviously the research that Forrester ran on our behalf definitely proves that. So much has changed. It's really difficult to say, what's the top 2 or 3 things, but it's a really exciting time, and one that marketers really need to lean into and understand what this new Workday Consumer is all about.
And absolutely, I think the pandemic has affected everyone differently. Overall, I think globally, what I'm hearing is that we've seen an increase in productivity. So there's no problem to solve as such. I think it's the flexibility that the flexibility of being at work and being able to do your personal things has helped people to just do more on both fronts. So I think that's great. So Nick, this is a very, very interesting term that has been coined in the report called the Workday Consumer. Can you share some insights, some data points into who you would specifically call the Workday Consumer, and what specific buying habits do you see for them?
Well, absolutely. I mean, look, there's so many interesting data points that have come out of the research, not just in India, but globally, actually. And intuitively, we knew something significant had shifted. I know everybody's been through, the same sort of challenges over the last number of years. And based on the signals that we see that come out of our search engine, Bing, and our browser Edge, we kind of knew something was up, but we had to prove that. Hence the partnership that we struck up with Forrester Consulting. So the research spoke to over 5,000 consumers. So it's a pretty robust study, and 1,300 marketing and digital advertising decision makers from companies all over the world. So we really wanted to get a sense of, firstly, what's happened at the consumer level, and then what are marketers actually thinking and doing, and how are they changing and adapting based on this new research. And then what we've found is the changing habits online are consistent in all markets around the world, as I said. So specifically in India, 51% of Indian consumers said that they work from home, which is higher than the global average, which is at 49%. From a global perspective, nearly 2/3 regularly research and purchase products during work time. Most of these on the PC. So the convergence of work and personal. PC is the device that really is coming through loud and clear. As you would expect, people are just they're working on their PCs, and then when they have a little bit of time in between meetings, then they stay on their computer. Whereas if you think about that from if you're in the office in sort of pre-pandemic times, those times that you have in between, you might be on your mobile phone as you're racing between meeting to meeting. So some really interesting stats coming through. And Indian consumers using PC, 70% of Indian consumers using PC for personal tasks. And what's interesting about this one is, in India, mobile consumption has been very well documented over the last number of years, and continues to be a key device. PC actually is a really key device when it comes to purchasing retail and researching online. Indian consumers tend to use PC more for those types of tasks than they do on mobile. So a little bit counterintuitive to what we thought, but the research came through and pretty loud and clear. And then we're going to see this continue over the journey, where 44% of global consumers expect to increase their purchasing during work time in the next 12 months. So while we're seeing a lot of that already happen now, it's pretty set in stone that people are going to continue to do so, providing they remain productive at work and are able to get their work tasks done.
Fantastic. I think it's the laptop or the PC that's really come back into focus now. I think mobile was you're right, mobile was a very, very big story, but with people working and doing your purchases and doing all the side hustles at the same time, I think the PC has really come back into focus and a very, very important device now. So Nick, tell me something. How do you build personas in this case? So, because from what you're telling me, clearly the online behavior is a mix of, buying and, doing your work, doing your personal stuff. So what kind of data do you typically collect, and how, most importantly, how do you make sense of this data? Because everyone's great at collecting data. How do you make sense of this data?
Well, that's a great question, and it's not an easy thing to solve. I think the first thing to say here is that marketers really need to understand, what consumers are doing during these days. So you get that information through your analytics. Obviously, when are people logging in to your website? How long are they standing? What pages are they visiting? How long do they dwell on those pages, and so on? So, really understanding sort of what traffic you are seeing, what purchases you are seeing, through over the 7 days. Then it's really starting to think about your day part strategies. So day parting is a very tried and tested marketing strategy. So of course you want to be maximizing your ad dollars in the times that you think or consumers are receptive to your ads. So that would be another piece. And then the other piece that we talk to advertisers about a lot and marketers a lot is understanding intent. So what is the intention of your consumers at the times of day that they are logging in and looking for things? For example, is it coffee time? Are they browsing and just looking around? Do they have a bit more of a window? Should you be showing your messages for a product that requires a lot more consideration at certain times of day? Should you be showing those messages on a mobile device or a PC? Or even on connected TV or television? This is really ubiquitous of all media. So screen or multi-screen strategies, it's important. But when you think about consumer intent, you should then really decide, well, what messages do I show on which device at what time of day, depending on what the consumers are doing. So that's really interesting, but it's not easy to collect all of that data. But I would certainly start by looking at your own analytics platform, understanding how consumers are sort of interacting and moving through your own website and content, and then looking at all of your media data from all of the different partners that you might use, and really understand, at what time of day are my clicks coming through? Am I getting impressions more in the afternoon than in the morning, and therefore upweighting or downweighting your media as they go through the day? So, and then finally, things like, is your message best consumed sitting down or standing up? Can your message be understood in 2 seconds, or does it need more time to land? What I worry about a little bit here is that not enough advertisers all their agencies are sort of leaning into this change and really understanding what it means and how their marketing programs need to change. So I would encourage all marketers out there to start thinking a little bit more along those lines and using their analytics to really help guide their thinking. Not to lose sight of the creative process. That's people really interact with great creative and fantastic messages, but more so about where you put those messages and when you put those messages, and do you upweight or downweight your media investment based on the signals that you're seeing come through your analytics tools.
So you're saying there are these small windows of micro boredom or small windows of opportunity throughout the day where you kind of zoom out from work and want to do something else, and that's where the marketers need to focus on.
Correct. And also the messaging itself, the creative itself, thinking about knowing what certain tasks that people are doing during the day, and then serve messages that are relevant to those particular moments. So, if if we know that consumers are doing their washing, their weekly washing on a Tuesday at 11 a.m. after their morning meeting, then should you not be showing things around that time, or at least communicating in that way with your consumers, knowing that they're going through these behaviors, or they're doing it, as opposed to they only do it on the weekends when they get home from work on a Friday afternoon. So, and then the traditional commute from 7 to 8, let's say, or from 8 to 9, depending on where you work, the lunch break between 12 and 1 or 1 to 2, and then the home commute from 5 to 6 or 4 to 5, depending. So that's the traditional sort of timing that we're used to, but that's changed. People work from home, they start at 7. So should you start your messaging slightly earlier or slightly later? There's a coffee break somewhere in between there. So it's really just understanding, how to build new personas, and your personas might be totally changed. We talk about the grocery buyer, or a lot of FMCG brands like to target mums because they are the buyer in the house, but maybe it's dad now because dad's working from home and he's got a little bit more time to go to the grocery store now than perhaps what he has had historically. Maybe there's a school run that the dad's doing more so than the mum these days. So things have really just been flipped on their head, and marketers have now a wonderful opportunity to try and understand these new behaviors, how people have changed, and then, adjust their marketing strategies accordingly.
Absolutely. That's very, very interesting. And I'm sure very, very challenging, which brings me to my next question. So, Nick, the Workday Consumer is clearly using at least 2 devices, which is a laptop and a mobile phone. And sometimes there is a bit of television thrown in by virtue of being at home, making the job of this marketer, with the data, the number of devices, the level of distraction that is clearly available from work, from buying, and then the home front as well. The fragmentation and distraction in behavior is really huge. How should a media planner really pick inventory that can address the consumer directly or effectively in this system?
Well, I think and again, it's a tough question, and I don't have the silver bullet answer, I'm afraid. But what I would say is that it's important that marketers understand their consumer and what they do and the devices they use, and they are across those devices, in a relevant way. And I think so that would be the first thing. So we've seen Microsoft Advertising recently announced a partnership with Netflix. And we know through that relationship that the viewing hours through pandemic has gone crazy. I mean, Netflix is, like a lot of other streaming services, are booming because people have got more time to watch more content these days. So yeah, I would just say to be across as many of those as you can, but in a relevant way, but thinking about it slightly differently. So if you're on mobile and you're on social, and you understand that that environment is more about scrolling, it's in between moments, as you're catching up with what's happening in your social feeds, people are scrolling through. Think about your own behavior. I certainly do. Is that the same creative and message that you want to put and run it against, a bigger screen where people are a bit more lean back, sitting down, whether it's online video or it's television or it's even the laptop where we're sitting in front of our screens all day? So, that's what I would say. The other piece here is really thinking about your first party data where possible, and working with partners that you can unify the ID of that particular consumer. So, the industry's, I think, been blessed and cursed by the cookie. The cookie has been a fantastic tool that the industry has used for many years to try and stitch together lots of different audience personas and measurements and analytics and all those sorts of things. But it's a proxy, actually. It's not a one-to-one sort of relationship with a consumer. So where possible, work with providers that provide sort of first party ID solutions. Then you can, if those devices are logged in, then you'll be able to sort of work out who those consumers are, and that actually, even though they're watching 3 different devices, PC, laptop, PC, mobile, and maybe connected TV, the unified ID helps you identify that that's one user rather than sort of 3 different people across those devices. And again, that will help because you can then start to think about, well, at what time do I serve ads on the mobile versus the PC and so on.
Absolutely. So devices are being used in extremely different ways, and marketers really need to find a way around it, and trying to figure out, be it the cookie, be it the first party data, be it some other way to understand this.
Absolutely. And I think it's really an important part. I mean, I know that the industry globally is, on the cusp of something really like a massive change, actually. If you think about the cookie and the measurement and the way that the industry has been built off the back of the cookie, and that's about to go away. I know Google has delayed the deprecation of the cookie within their environment, but as soon as that happens, the whole industry is going to have the rug pulled from underneath them, us, so to speak. So the smart marketers are already out there figuring out what the solution is. They're building their own data. Data is king here. This is really important for all marketers to start thinking about, how do I build and enhance my own first-party data, and working with providers who can collect, harmonize, and then build insights off the back of that. Microsoft's a player in this space. There are many others, who are certainly leaning into this area. But if you're a marketer out there listening to this and you haven't started to think about your first-party data strategy in a post-cookieless world, then you should, because this is going to hit you soon, and now's the time to start preparing for that future.
I think in India, we've started this conversation really, really early on. I think from the time that Google actually started talking about deprecating the cookie, and thankfully they've given us a little more time than they originally planned to. So marketers, the typical challenge is marketers are collecting this data. The diamond in the rough is making sense of that data, and making sense of that data appropriately too.
Definitely.
So Nick, commerce has become like a really, really big theme on digital now, and optimizing commerce in the best possible way, being able to sell at all touch points of the consumer journey is becoming very important. And marketers are applying their investments in the light of such a heavy focus on sales. What's your take on this?
Well, it's obvious why brands focus on performance, of course, and this is an easy thing for me to say, but if you're a marketer with pressures to drive ROI, then of course you're going to be focusing on these areas. What I worry a little bit about is the heavy focus on performance only media can then limit your ability to drive volume. Because there's a fine balance to be had with driving awareness of your product, whether it's new, you're trying to establish yourself, or even existing. We know that brand advertising works. It's just much harder to measure in a performance world. So I totally understand the performance metrics matter. Obviously, when we're looking at bottom line, especially in today's environment where we're facing macroeconomic challenges and businesses are really under pressure to perform and show value back to their shareholders. But we've seen, over many decades, that there's been lots of studies done that prove that the brands that invest in their brand through challenging times, or that can come out the other end stronger than most of their competitors. So it's an easy thing to do, much harder to execute on. I know marketers around the world, and no doubt in India as well, are working hard on convincing their CFOs and their CEOs that marketing needs to remain at the top table. But it really does work. But I think that's the main thing I'm just concerned about, is just continuing to invest in your brand, but then linking the two. It's important not to spend on brand without any metrics. Of course, we have to be accountable to every dollar we invest, but there are ways in which we can link that through modeling, through brand tracking studies, to understand the effect of your performance that's driven by your brand.
So exactly, there is no really magic bullet here. Your basics, marketing basics still remain the same. Branding is important, as is sales. So we'll have to start juggling the two very, very soon. So Nick, coming to our last question, this has been a wonderful conversation. Any piece of advice that you want to leave marketers with for 2023?
Oh, what advice do I need? Well, I guess the first thing that I would say is I'd encourage anyone that's responsible for marketing or consumer insights, and this includes agency partners as well. First of all, download the white paper, download the Workday Consumer white paper to have a look at this. It's located at microsoftadvertising.com/Workday Consumer. There's some really interesting stats in there. So please go and have a look. The second thing, I would challenge marketers to revisit their consumer targeting and audience profiling strategies. Chances are they're still using pre-pandemic targeting, which basically means you're not meeting your consumers where they are. So really dig into that. It's not easy, as I said, but go in and have a look. It will pay dividends. We know that so many industries have had to reevaluate how they operate post-pandemic, and advertising is no different. I mean, think about the auto sector. The autos, the car manufacturers don't import, hundreds of cars anymore. They make them to order, because consumers have actually shown and proved that they're happy to wait 12 months for a new car to arrive, where maybe post-pandemic or pre-pandemic, they wouldn't have done that. Commercial real estate's the same. Are businesses taking as much floor space as they once were? Travel's the same, education's the same, and the list goes on and on. And as I said before, marketers really need to now consider consumer mindset when deciding which platforms and devices to advertise on. Are they best putting their messaging on television or PC, or even mobile, or all three at the same time? Are they selling something that requires more consideration or comparison? So lots and lots of different areas that I would encourage sort of marketers to think about. What worries me a little bit that is not enough yet are leaning into the change. I think everybody's pretty much convinced that things have changed, and they're not going back to the way they were. There'll be similarities the way we worked before. We're starting to see that with businesses coming back to work, but there's still a lot of focus on flexibility and agility. And actually, as workers, as employees, we demand that from our employers now. And I think that's become, a key question in interviews now that I have with potential candidates is, what's your work from home policy like? What sort of technology access do we get, remotely, and so on and so forth. We weren't having these conversations, 2-3 years ago. We see in the research that many brands still say they're relying on pre-pandemic profiling. In fact, about 67% of the respondents in the study rated their organizations as intermediates or novices at developing in-depth target personas. So, it's important, as I said, to really start thinking about this as they move into this new space. And the Workday Consumer, it needs to be understood and incorporated. It's really important that this starts to be thought of, so brands can continue to thrive and grow in this new world.
Fantastic. Nick, what I wanted to say is thank you. Thank you for normalizing the Workday Consumer, making it an accepted activity, being, from marketers, because, the world runs through marketers. I'd say, the world does everything marketers tell them to. So thank you for normalizing this for marketers, so they can have that strong conversation with the CFO, with the CEO, and get more dollars on the table to target the Workday Consumer as they need to be targeted. So thank you so much, and we'll see you soon at our next event.
Lovely. Thanks for having me.